Hello, this is Richard Lowe, and this is the Leaders and Their Stories podcast. I am the writing king and ghostwriting guru, and I thank you for coming to watch and listen to this podcast. I'm here with Arnaud Lucas, who is an expert at leadership. Arnaud, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Arnaud. Thank you for having me on the podcast. As you can hear from my accent, I'm originally from France, but I've been in the US now for 27 years. First 8 years in Texas doing startups. And then since then, I moved to the Boston area. So I've been in Boston for a while. In Boston, now I have two kids, two teenagers. So, which is, in terms of leadership, that's interesting as well.
Family leadership, yes.
Exactly. But yeah, and nowadays I work for a company called Cambridge Mobile Telematics as a leader there, technical leader. I've always been an engineer all my life doing software, but since TripAdvisor, which is now for a while now, I've moved into management and leadership, effectively.
All right. All right. That sounds like an interesting story. You've been in leadership for many years then.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned as a leader?
So there are a couple of lessons I learned. I think that some of them actually don't necessarily come from the work itself. From the work itself, I think my first lesson when I moved from being a strong technical contributor to management was the fact that effectively, even if it's faster to do the work yourself, you should not do the work yourself, right? Otherwise, you're not growing your team, you're not growing their expertise. So there's a lot of things about making sure that it's not about necessarily you doing the work as a leader. It's how do you give ownership to other people, and for them then to think about the work and be able to actually do the work. Obviously, you're here for support, for giving direction and other things in some ways, but it's really not on you to do that. So that's one thing. The other lessons of leadership really come from actually hobbies. I love to garden, so I feel like there are a lot of actually parallels between leading an organization and gardening, in my opinion. I love to bake. And for me, I see a lot of parallels between baking and kind of extreme ownership. All different things that I do outside of work that tends to influence how I work as well.
Interesting. Yeah. The first thing I learned about leadership, I was the director of technical services and computer operations at Trader Joe's. That's a mouthful. And I learned that it's hard.
Yes.
Because nobody really tells you. I mean, there's all kinds of books and stuff, but nobody can really give you the experience of actually leading people until you actually do it. That's what I found.
The problem with people is they are people. I mean, I come from software, right? Computers are one and zeros, right?
Right.
It's some things you don't understand, but there is a certain structure to that, right? And it's easy. Once you get the hang of it, it's kind of repeatable in some ways. People are not like that. And that's why experience comes handy, because to your point, you can read as many books as you want, get expertise in different ways, podcasts and other things. But at the end of the day, you have to experience it effectively.
Yeah, I remember the first time, and cross cultures makes it even more difficult. I had an Israeli and a Palestinian working together on the same team. And boy, there were fireworks. Literally, we had to separate them like with a wall because they were pretty passionate. And then there were Russians and even a French person. And French people. Whoa, no kidding. And then led, of course, consultants. We had a consulting team from France that was very interesting. A whole different set of expectations that we had to come to a mutual understanding on. You've worked with cross-cultural teams, I'm sure.
Well, yes, not only that, but I would argue I'm already part of the problem, if you because I landed in an American company. I'm like, at this point, I feel like I've adjusted pretty well, but especially in my first days in Texas, that was quite a shock, I shall say. But yeah, I've led teams across the world. Actively, I had a team in Oxford in the UK for a while, and multiple teams in the US between the West Coast and the East Coast. I was working very closely with teams in Australia, which was interesting. So I've had my fair share. And nowadays, half of my team actually is in Budapest, so in Hungary. So
that's actually quite common. I hire, as a ghostwriter, I outsource a lot of my stuff because I can't do it all, especially marketing stuff. And I just hired two people from Pakistan. I've hired people from Argentina. The Philippines is excellent for hiring good consultants to do things for me. So all over the world. When I was at Trader Joe's, I used to hire veterans a lot. So I'd hire ex-Special Forces and ex-Marines. I loved having military people work with me. They were very disciplined. Just said, you say, I need this. They say, okay. And when you need to buy, blah, blah, blah. And it gets done. Magic, don't have to worry about it. That discipline,
Yes.
very reliable. That discipline is hard to find outside of the military people. I mean, as people get older, I think they get more disciplined. That's just a part of growing older, or they don't. If the habits become ingrained, then you've got a problem.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the company as well, because I've worked for bigger companies, for small companies. Small companies, I feel like, there is more place for people that are more like mavericks and that kind of thing, where we promote the fact that people need to think outside the box and do things quickly, and uh, uh, where reliability is not necessarily the main word, but as the company matures, effectively being reliable start becoming a thing where you have a deadline, you expect things to be done by that deadline, and not like, oh, now you focus on something else that has nothing to do with what was being asked. So I think that's part of that too. I think it depends on the company's maturity too and their needs.
The thing that surprised me the most is when you're leading a team, you're actually also leading up. So I had to lead my boss. He wasn't a technical person. I had to lead his boss, who also wasn't technical, and his boss, who was the CEO. And I had to provide leadership all the way up to get what I needed to get done to meet the goals that they gave me. And that was very odd because I didn't speak the right language. I was a tech person also. I came from, assembly language programmer. It was a whole different culture that I had to learn. And I was very irritating to them for a while because I was speaking tech. I'm sure you've run into the same kind of thing.
Yeah, so in my previous company, I was the CTO. So I was reporting to the CEO, who was not technical. So definitely some of that. I think it's more, I think it's not just a problem of having to work with technical people versus non-technical people. It's also the fact to understand what everybody needs. Right? So the CEO, for example, cares about impact and business results and things like that. She could care less about these things is broken and we need to fix. Yeah, that's how the sausage is being made. Take care of that. But really, where do I get my thing that will grow my business? That's really what you care about. And I can appreciate that, right? So at least, and even when you have other technical people, because my current CTO is very technical, but it's more about what is that thing? Why are we doing this? Right? It's less about the technical thing, it's more why are we spending time on these things versus that other thing? And so just different needs that people have that you need to be able to answer effectively.
Well, you have to speak the language that they have, and you have to understand what drives them and what they're going for. And as you say, it's different for everybody. When I was there, I reported to the VP of MIS, who reported to the CFO, who reported to the president, who reported to the CEO. I still have that memorized 12 years later. And the CFO didn't care about technical stuff at all. I mean, he didn't know it. He didn't care. He'd walk in and talk about technical stuff and he'd throw you out of the room. He wanted, if you even got to talk to him, he wanted to know ROI and, what's it going to cost and how are we going to pay for it and all that kind of stuff. And does it fit in the budget? And it was a different language than I was used to.
Yeah, no, exactly. So there's definitely an adjustment there. That said, I guess to go back to managing up. So you have, I think what's critical, especially when your boss is actually not technical, is actually to be very transparent into what you're doing. So for example, something I learned at TripAdvisor that I kept doing since then, even though I was not being asked, is to send a kind of a status report on a weekly basis to my boss. Where everything that's top of mind for me, I put everything that's top of mind for me in there. And that way my boss knows exactly, okay, this is what Arnaud cares about. This is what he has done.
Right.
This is what is driving. And so I think that alignment, I think is very important, right? Yeah, because even if you don't have often one-on-ones, even if ultimately what the person cares about is something else, be able to show the
Right.
work and everything that you are doing, I think is important. And Gil can promote alignment as well, because that person can say, "Oh, why are you doing this? That doesn't make sense. Like, you should not be focusing on that."
Yeah, when I first started, I had an interesting boss, and he hired me and the networking person. We were both directors at the same time, and we fought like cats and dogs. Oh my, we practically almost came to blows. Sometimes we'd go out in the back, away from everybody else, and just scream at each other. And finally, we both looked at each other and said, "Why are we doing this?" So let's check our job description. We got the ID check, and we looked at our job description. They were the same. We were managing the same people, the same resources, the same everything. Obviously, the boss just copy pasted. And we said, okay, we can fix this. So we split the duties. We didn't even ask our boss. We split the duties. He was a network guy. I was the infrastructure guy. And we basically led at that point, saying, and we went to our boss and said, this is our new duties. And he's managing these people and I'm managing these people. And the boss was like, okay. And from then on, we got along just fine. It was just simply we had the same duties and we didn't actually know it.
Yeah, not only that, but I think that reminds me that in a lot of my job at this point, from the onboarding aspect, I remember from my last two jobs, I didn't have anybody that could tell me what I should be doing, effectively. I didn't have that luxury to some extent of that. So I had to figure out my own path, right? I had to figure out, what I should be doing, why, what should be the vision, and I had to start almost from scratch, effectively, for doing that. So be able to obviously look at systems and things like that, sure, but also having a kind of a process where you have very kind of high level questions you can ask everybody you talk to, right? Having this, onboarding interviews with a bunch of people and asking the same questions over and over. And that way you can start quantifying what are the pain points, what are the opportunities, why are we not doing something? I think for me has been super beneficial since then, since I've started doing that. So you have to create your own destiny, I guess.
Well, my first two jobs, I was a VP of two startups. So one and then another one for 4 years, one for 5 years. And they were startups. So there were no manuals, there were no nothing. So they, I got hired and I walked in and said, okay, here's your desk, have fun. And it's like, what do I do? You're a VP, figure it out. And it was interesting.
Yeah, I remember even my first job, so back in Texas, I arrived. The person that was before me left. So they say, "Oh, we have this piece of software. We need to release it today." And I was like, "So how do you do that?" "No clue. Figure it out."
Surprise!
So it was I was in charge of the middleware, the security solution. I was like, okay, I guess I'm spending time trying to figure out how to build that thing so that I can release it. I guess that's what I'm doing today for my first day.
Yep. And then there's times when you don't have the authority. We had a crash, and the database administrator who was responsible for the Oracle database was in an airplane getting ready to parajump from in the desert. So he wasn't available. And this all we had was pagers. So we were talking to him through a pager. We didn't have smartphones. So okay, had to deal with that. So I had to hire people on the fly to come in and do it. Some of them actually flew in to help because it was a bad one. And then we had other resources that I had to gather and stuff. And I didn't have time. My boss was unreachable, and I didn't have time to try and hunt him down. So I just did it. I didn't have any authority for all this. But the number one rule was the stores come first, always. And I was like, well, this fits into that. I have to get this computer going to get the stores. We got it going. It took a while, but we got it going. The rule is the stores. So we know the goal. Customers, obviously customers, and that's stores. And that made the decision simple. They can't get mad at me for spending a lot of money hiring these people to get stuff to the stores. And it's okay, fine, and I did it. And I was fine. Everybody was happy.
It's a great example of extreme ownership. You do what you have to do.
Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, and if let the chips fall where they may when you get there. And if they're mad at you, they're mad at you. As long as you've got good reason for doing it, you come out in the end okay, or you won't. That's just the way it is. Because there's always the option. It's not my problem. But that wasn't an option. I was in charge.
And I think that a lot of tech companies that I've been at, actually, the not my problem is actually not a thing. Like, in order for you to be considered as a strong leader, everything is your problem, effectively. Everything that you care about should become your problem. There is no, part of the organization that's off limit kind of thing. If there is a way to make something better, and make it better. Obviously, you want to be careful how you do that, but there is a way of making sure you don't piss people off. Ultimately, I think that there is that expectation that if you have great ideas and you can make something better, then do it, figure it out, and make it happen.
Right. Although like you said, you have to be careful that you don't take on too many responsibilities that are outside of your responsibilities, because then you'll find yourself not getting paid to do things that aren't really your job. And that just happens in all businesses. The boss might come to you and say, Sally's quit the company, so you need to take on Sally's role for a little while. You say, fine, and you're not thinking compensation or anything like that. Before long, you're doing Sally's job for good. And you didn't get a raise for it. You didn't get a promotion. You're just doing two jobs now. You got to be careful of that. And you should have that conversation immediately. So Sally's left the company. Good. I can take it. How long is this going to last? And is there compensation considered for this extra work that I'm doing? And if not, what about time off, comp time, blah, blah, blah. Am I getting, are we going to train somebody else? You need to make sure that's known up front, because you do have the option to say no. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it, but you do.
That's fair. That's a fair point. I've seen plenty of examples of that. And the problem with that actually is, from a performance management aspect, it's even a double whammy, because from performance management aspect, when it's time to be evaluated for your performance, a lot of companies would say, well, that's great that you're doing two jobs, but we're only paying you for this job. So how are you doing against that job? And it's like, well, I'm doing two jobs. Obviously, I could not do as much on that job.
Or you can work 40 hours or 80 hours a week or something ridiculous. And it's your choice. And if you find yourself working 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week or whatever, working weekends, you probably need to take a good look at what other duties you've taken on and what can you delegate and things like that, because you should be working a normal week. At least the weekend should be free, because you really need an outside life. That's very important, I think. And good leaders know that for their troops and for themselves. They know that that people need to have their lives. And barring emergencies, like a major computer crash or something like that, you let them have their lives. Everybody have their lives.
Exactly.
And I know that the younger people coming on board these days tend not to accept encroachment on their life as much as we used to me as an older guy.
No, which is not a bad thing either.
It's not. I wish I'd been a lot more inflexible on that, because I did a lot of things that I probably should have pushed back and said, so how are we going to manage this, boss? I'll manage it if you want, but I'm going to get consulting help, or I'm going to do whatever I need to do. And that was usually my fallback, is, okay, I'm going to get a consultant to help me with this. And they, okay, fine, do what you need to do.
That makes sense.
Consultants aren't usually a long-term solution.
They're a good stopgap, for sure.
They're a good stopgap. I think there's even laws about making them a long-term solution for many hours, in California especially. So interesting. Well, I think we've talked about leadership for a good amount of time. Do you have any closing words you'd want to say to people to help them?
I think that good closing word. That's interesting. I would say, whether you're baking or gardening or leading a global engineering team, actually, be able to have the right clarity, to your point, care, right? You care about the people, you want to have that trust, and continuous learning, because I believe that, in order for you to, obviously in technology, but now I will argue in industry, right? You have to learn, you have to keep on learning, not learning is not an option. And so you have to do that. And I believe that, through that, I feel like, that's how you can be a big, strong leader.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for appearing on the podcast. How can people get hold of you if they need to?
Best way is my LinkedIn.
Okay.
LinkedIn.com/Lucas. That's my handle. Best way, for sure. So feel free to reach out.
CASARN.
That's correct.
Good. And the link will be in the description also, of course. Okay. Yes. Well, that's very good. Thank you for appearing. My name is Richard Lowe, and this has been the Leaders in Their Stories podcast. I'm the writing king and ghostwriting guru. And if you need my help writing a book, then you can go to my websites and you'll find I'll click through for my scheduling. Thank you for appearing, and that's it.
Thank you.